3, 2, 1, 0, 0, and liftoff.
Welcome to Donuts and Bikes, the mountain bike coaching podcast. Your hosts are Paul Howard and Christian Jackson, and we're here to discuss the skills, techniques, and concepts we've used over the last 20 years to improve your riding or coaching. Enjoy the show. Hello, everybody. So today, Christian is not with us. I'm in Silverstar Bike Park, and I'm really stoked to have a sit-down chat with Jeff Chandler and Simon Holden, two bigwigs from the snowboard industry. I hope you enjoy the conversation. Really, the idea was to talk to Jeff and Simon, who are both heavily involved in the snowboard world, but also have some experience in the mountain bike world and the ski world as well. And one of our goals is to really try and bring education pieces to coaches from different sports and to hopefully try and inspire coaches to branch out and see, what are some different ways, different courses, different sports through which they can continue to either develop and improve their own riding skills, but also coaching skills as well. And I think cross sports and cross training and embracing different seasons, embracing different sports, the variety of things is the key part to it. So that was kind of the goal with the sit down with Jeff and Simon today. So two amazing people, really good humans, and I hope you enjoy the conversation.
Yeah, I just think, I'm here in Silverstar running an advanced coach flow course, and it was pretty cool today because I've got this girl on the course and she's shredding, and, I learned today that she's a surfer, she's a skateboarder, she skis. So, with this topic that we were going to talk about today, I thought, well, that's kind of perfect example of what we're talking about, right? And what we always see in the winter industry and then the summer industry, and trying to get coaches together and trying to get coaches to open up their minds a little bit, open up their toolboxes, but not just coaches, riders as well. I see so many riders obsessed with biking, and sometimes they plateau, and you can't help but think the best thing you could do is not bike. You go learn another sport, go learn another movement pattern, play tennis, and then bring that athleticism or that experience back into your biking. Do you know what I mean?
Or even a different style of biking. I'm amazed how many bikers are so opposed to, how many mountain bikers are so opposed to gravel riding, or how many so opposed to road riding.
Totally.
It's all transferable.
Yeah. And even in the winter, it's why would you ski if you snowboard? I'm like, well, why would you snowboard if you ski? It's all just planks of wood on frozen water. Let's just go ride. But anyway, I thought with our recent announcement with Cassie and being here this weekend with you, Jeff, I thought it'd be cool to kind of touch on that announcement and sort of what our goals are for that between GSMBC and Cassie. But at the same time, we kind of talked about this topic basically. So maybe we'll just start with, for listeners, who you guys are, because right now I'm looking at two very handsome gentlemen that I've known and worked with for a long time, and they've inspired me and mentored me and helped me in numerous ways. So very privileged to be sitting across you guys from today. So maybe Jeff, start with you.
Sure. I'm Jeff Chandler, and I'm the executive director for CASI, which is the Canadian Association of Snowboard Instructors. And so a lot like the GSMBC, we train and certify snowboard instructors within Canada and internationally. And we have a series of 4 levels of instructor certification, plus some add-on modules in different areas for sort of special interest modules. And I've been a snowboard instructor for 30 years, and I taught mountain biking back in the early 2000s when COP in Calgary was starting up one of the first bike parks. And so I was kind of a half-time trail builder, half-time mountain bike instructor back before it was even really a thing. And
holy cow, I never knew that.
There you go.
What?
So
that's crazy.
Yeah. So
maybe I did know that, but I don't know. I don't think I ever knew that.
Well, my skill level wouldn't show it, but I have been riding bikes for a long time, and I've definitely taught more snowboarding, and now I just bike because I love it.
Yeah.
So bike with my family. My kids are now grown up, and I'm chasing my kids around, and especially my son. But I made my career and my life through snowboarding, and always had riding bikes and other activities, water activities, paddling, and whatever, to sort of bridge the winters. Yeah, and I think that's really important. And I had an experience last weekend, actually, where I ran into someone who I know from sort of my winter core of friends, and I bumped into him and at a resort and said, "Hey, how's it going?" And he was like, "Oh, only 98 more days until snow." And I'm like, that's kind of a sad way to live, right?
Yeah.
The summer's pretty fun, too, if you have something to get you through to the next winter.
Totally. And it doesn't have to be biking, like you said, like paddling,
whatever it is.
Yeah. Totally. Cool.
Yeah.
Simon.
Impressive resume there, eh?
Yeah, quite a resume.
That's awesome.
Amateur mountain bike coach. I never uncertified. I never knew that. Yeah.
Whoa. Let's not talk about that part. Kind of similar path to Jeff. I've been involved in the outdoor rec industry my whole career, mostly through resorts and resort management, both in the winter and summer side of things. So managing snow schools and rental operations, retail operations, and patrol and all that sort of stuff. And then in the summers, looking after mountain bike programs and summer camps, and trail building and that kind of stuff as well. So a whole range of things. And currently I've kind of stepped away from that side of things and focusing now on coaching and training full time, which is really where my passion's been the whole time. So all those years kind of been in office doing the management stuff, always stayed involved on the teaching side as well, and primarily running courses and instructor and coach training and certification. And now that's sort of my full-time gig, which is amazing. And also been involved in a whole bunch of different sports, both in the just recreational, just the doing it side of things, and also the coaching side of things. I find it's really beneficial to, get involved in a bunch of different sports and see different perspectives. I hold a bunch of different certifications, and not all of them I'm super active in, but having gone through those courses and seen how different coaching organizations approach their learning models and their teaching has been really beneficial. Jeff and I have talked about, I should throw Jeff under the bus, I guess, but maybe I've talked about over the years and Jeff has listened, is that, for some of these top levels of certs, it should almost be mandatory that you have to bring another cert into the mix. And certainly most of those that have been successful at the high levels of certification do have some sort of other coaching experience. And it might not even be super related. It might be snowboarding and volleyball or snowboarding and swimming. Nothing wrong with those sports, but sort of different ends of the spectrum, and but all that knowledge helps build you not only as a coach, but also as a lifelong learner. When you learn how to teach different things, it also helps you to continue to improve in your own, just for your own enjoyment.
Absolutely. And I was thinking as you're talking there too, like sometimes if we zoom out and we look at just riders / athletes, like one of the topics we hear a lot these days is, if kids specialize too soon, it's not good for them, right? Like if you look at all these kind of Wayne Gretzky's, all these greats, Michael Jordan, you can track back and they're multi-sports till like well into their teens, even early 20s. I remember that stint where Jordan just decided to quit basketball and then become like a pro baseball player. Like,
why not?
Listen, why not? I mean, when you're Michael Jordan, you can kind of do what you want. That's my goal, is to get my logo on a pair of Nikes. But
time's taken.
We might be like dream big. We might be like 1,000 years away from that. But I think it's cool, and I think that's a big part of what we're talking about today. Is sort of and there's a lot of history and science behind that too, and trying to figure out. I think one question is, why is it, do you think, parents and or coaches and or just people themselves, why do they either specialize too early, or why do you think they kind of limit themselves to maybe one main sport? They might do a few other ones, but what do you think that is? What are some of the reasons for that? Because ultimately, I think that's the sticking point. If we can address why do people specialize too soon, or why do they get kind of hyper-focused onto one sport, then maybe we can kind of find some solutions to break that.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, Jeff, you've got kids at that age that are sort of getting into sports, and you see it a lot. I think part of it is, and this is Simon's opinion, but I think part of it is societal, and it's not just at an early age. I mean, I see adults too that sort of pick a sport, and maybe adults have limited time. Maybe that's a little bit of it. You only got so much recreational time, so you pick one thing, or you can only have so much gear, so you pick one thing. But I think most people would be better off having a bit of a broader spectrum and help maintain your sanity too.
Yeah, I see that for sure. Like even in my experience, like time and money, right? Like I remember saying to my kids a couple of years ago, like skiing, snowboarding, it was like, you've got to pick one because we're not doing both.
Right.
And we bike as well. So it's like, you've got to pick one. And I totally get that. And, hockey's a good example. Like, holy cow, that's expensive, an amazing sport. But I think part of it is trying to find sports that are essentially free or cheap. And in my mind, like for biking, it's crazy expensive, but it can be cheap, especially BMX. You can get a decent BMX for a few $100s. It doesn't really need any maintenance, and you can literally ride it for free anywhere that you live. And that's how I kind of grew up biking. I had a BMX, but mostly we just treated our crappy mountain bikes like BMXs. We just jumped off stairs. Do what you do, but I think that's a part of it. I mean, what's your thoughts, Jeff? I think people kind of get stuck into.
I think that most people come by it honestly because you sort of know, and it's sort of drilled into you that you get good at what you do the most of.
Yeah.
Right. And so we maybe somewhat misguidedly push that on our own kids sometimes. Like you got to follow this training program, and I think it's a bit systemic as well in a lot of sports. Like watching my own kids go through it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of sports are falling into that trap of more is better, and more isn't necessarily better, as we know. But I think it's about finding complementary or maybe even not complementary activities, but like anti-complementary activities, so that you have, at least in the early stages, you sort of have that broad exposure.
Yeah.
Because we know that you could see someone like any top level athlete in any sport, whether it's snowboard, ski, bike, they're probably pretty damn good at just about any activity that they choose to pick up, right?
Yeah.
Watch Mark McMorris jump on a surfboard or a skateboard, right? And snowboarding is his main focus, but through his early years, he probably was doing a lot of different stuff.
I think that's the key is those, especially those for kids, those early years, is trying to find. I think these days, like to your point, so kind of societal a little bit, kids tend to get programmed a lot. And it's like, you don't, unless you're in a program, you don't tend to do the sport. And I get it. But I feel like there's, and I'm guilty of it too. Like my kid is in a bike camp and a soccer camp and a swim club. And my argument that I have with Shannon all the time is like, can't we just go play football in the fields? That's literally what I grew up doing, was playing football. But none of us were in football clubs. We played for a team every now and then, you know what I mean? But I think that's part of it. But I think a key is just finding those sports or those activities that essentially can be either unprogrammed or kind of free, and understanding the value in that. Like pickleball right now is I don't know, what's your thoughts on pickleball? Should we just have a quick sidebar on pickleball?
No opinion, haven't tried it, so can't comment.
No comment.
But if it's getting people stoked, then I think it's awesome.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of that's what I've heard too, because my friend's really into it, and he's like, well, there's a ton of people playing pickleball that would never play tennis.
Yeah.
And that's accessible. Totally. And that's kind of my thought with e-bikes. Like there's probably people mountain biking that either would have given up or wouldn't have tried it because of e-bikes. So I think part of it is accessibility. Like how can you make a sport more accessible or more affordable? Which, I mean, we could talk about that to the cows come home, but
I think one of the beauty things about biking, sports in general, sort of as you alluded to, when when I was a kid anyway, and maybe it's just because I wasn't never super good at any one thing, or I just did a bunch of things, but I was always kind of like house league level, right? And there just wasn't a huge time commitment on any one thing. And it seems like now, and again, not having kids myself, but what I observe is that like once you get into something, all of a sudden it escalates. You need to be on. And it's like you're in the tournament somewhere every weekend. It's like, can we not just have like a Tuesday night practice and a Saturday morning game? Like, is that enough? Like, you know, and I think that maybe, you know, money's a factor for everyone.
Agree with that. 100% agree.
I mean, money's a factor for everyone at different levels, but time is the same factor for pretty much everyone. And if you have to commit 4 days a week to your baseball team, well, what else is there? You don't have time or energy to do anything else. So I always think, I mean, one of the things we talk a lot about in instruction and coaching side of things is this whole idea of sport for life. I mean, what are we really trying to get out of these sports? You know, aside from the 0.1% that's going to make it to the pros, but it seems like everybody thinks that's what they're aiming for. And is that really what we're aiming for, or is it just to be active for life? And then if that means you bike 1 day a week and you play pickleball 1 day a week, and you throw the disc golf around 1 day a week, and then that's active for life. And you're not going to be a pro in any one of those, but that doesn't make it any less enjoyable or any less beneficial.
I think a part of it, I mean, I think you're onto something there. Like a part of it is doing a sport and feeling like you have to excel at it, which for coaches is kind of what we do as snowboard coaches or mountain bike coaches. That's a big part of it. Like you're trying to get to a certain level 3, level 4, whatever it is. You have to invest the time because you can't get that good if you're not investing the time. But what I'm seeing, I think, a lot with kids, especially even in my programs, my mountain bike programs, is so many kids are just like, I want to get really good at this, and that's great because they're passionate, but almost to the point where no other sports matter, and they're not going to be a pro at it. Like that's never the goal. It's never the parent's goal. The kid doesn't even want to do it. But they almost feel like an external pressure to be competitive and to get to that double black diamond level or to go to the BC Cups and race. And it's awesome because I think that strive for excellence is a really good quality. But I think sometimes it can kind of backfire on us to the point where now you've got a 13-year-old so focused on one skill or one sport, and perhaps we're missing opportunities with all the other sports they could be doing. But I think also, like, what's your experience, Jeff, with like school that your kids are in? Like, I find the sport in the school our kids go to is horrible. So, like, if you want your kids to be like that active for life kind of thing, you kind of have to put them in programs.
Yeah, that's been
which is totally different to how I grew up in my school.
Same with me. It was all about school sports, and it seems like the outside of school programs and like the so-called sort of serious programs have really taken the time spotlight away from the school sports. The school sports still exist, but they don't seem to be as prominent as when we were kids. We've seen that with our kids for sure, which is too bad because that's the easy access way to try a bunch of different activities in a school year, right? You can be on the volleyball team, the basketball team, but the problem, I guess, is it butts up against the 4-day-a-week other sport program and the weekends away, and so maybe that's one of the reasons why they've kind of diminished. But I mean, the other thing, just as you were talking there a minute ago, the thing is, what I've really struggled with my own kids who are 14 and 11 is the more invested they tend to get, or the more you sort of push them to be invested in activities, you really run the risk of them learning to not love that activity anymore. And I really struggle with that with some of the sports that we're into, which is snowboarding and skiing and mountain biking, which are, we got into those sports because they're just super fun. And I really struggle with pushing my own kids into the competitive side and risking them getting to a point when they're 16, 17 and saying, I never want to ride a bike again. Or I never want to touch a snowboard again. And that's a real worry because these activities, these sports, these sort of open skill sports they're really lifestyle sports, and you can do them till you're older. And that's the goal, at least for me anyway, personally. So, and they want, like you say, they want to excel. They want to get to the BC Cup races. They want to do the slopestyle events, but that's always a bit of a friction point is at what point is it going to start to erode their love of just doing the activity?
And I think I think how to combat that is trying to actively get them doing another sport,
Other things, maybe. Yeah.
just so that, you know, they're not as hyper focused, or they realize that, gosh, it's fun just to do a sport.
Yeah.
And then hopefully they take that and keep that in their biking a little bit, or snowboarding, or whatever their main sport is.
Yeah.
But I was thinking there too, like, we talked a little bit about multi-sports and kids and kind of the kid family dynamic. I think moving up the age ladder to talking about adults for a bit, and maybe even at riders or coaches, but if you take snowboarding and skiing, for example, like, generally, if you class yourself as a skier or a snowboarder, you have some cash. You have a bit of cash, or you have a bit of time. And then you have half the year where there's no snow. So sort of my logic is, yes, there's restraints for time and money, but if you class yourself as a snowboard coach, then chances are you could probably buy a bike, or if not a bike, you could buy a paddleboard. Do you know what I mean? Or a skateboard or whatever, right? Like this, you've got the lifestyle. That's the word that connected with me, is like, for me, mountain bike is a lifestyle. And I kind of live that lifestyle if I'm on the beach, or if I'm on the snow, or if I'm in the mountains. Like it's just being active, like your point. So, but I don't know, what's your thoughts on that? Like where potentially we have a coach or a rider that's doing that sport. So clearly they have the means and time to do that sport. Like mountain bike, it's hard and it's expensive, and you don't really keep doing it unless you're just really into like pushing your skills, going outside, keeping fit, being outdoors, right?
It's not easy. It's hard, right? I mean, I think people embrace that fact.
It's hard. Yeah, exactly. Like
but I think some of that pressure comes from the seasonality a little bit. I mean, we're August, early September here, and so we're starting 3 more weekends at bike park. And people are like, well, why would I do anything else? I got 3 more weekends. Then the bike park's shut.
Yeah.
So, and it's a little bit the same in the winter. People get a bit frantic sometimes that, you know, it's a limited season in a sense. But then I guess you're crossing back and forth seasonally, which is good. But then within that season, maybe the pressure is just to, again, it sort of comes back to that time. I've only got so much free time, and bike park's only open for so long. So I'm gonna hit that bike park as much as I can.
I think a lot of it too is like, you know, why they might not do it, but then it kind of makes sense too. Like if you're intense with something, like you naturally want that time off, right? Like if you're really dedicated to snowboarding, coaching snowboarding, chances are that someone's like, you know what? I want to switch off, right? I don't want to do a sport. I don't want to risk getting hurt. I don't want to push myself. But one thing I like to think about sometimes, and sort of to get more into the weeds, I guess, and what might relate to some of the listeners, whether you're a coach or a rider, but, you know, we started kind of in a way thinking about a topic of like, why should people do more than one main sport? And if you're really passionate about the snowboarding or the biking or the skiing or the swimming, whatever your main sport is, and you want to improve, essentially what we're learning is movement patterns. We're learning body awareness, body conditioning, strength and conditioning, and we're learning that movement pattern process. So I thought it'd be kind of cool to maybe talk about like, what are some common movement patterns, maybe Jeff, for you that you see in snowboarding that are like common issues, and then you're like, man, if they could just do this sport, or if they could do that sport, or it would make feel something in a different way. Like, what are some common things you see in the winter where you're like, man, I wish I would. Yeah, I've explained this to them 50 times, and they're not getting it. They just need to feel it in a different way.
Yeah, well, this is, in my mind, this is sort of the biggest value for a coach or an instructor to branch out and look at different activities. And I mean, a perfect example, today I spent the morning with you on the advanced coach course, and we were talking about introducing jumping and this concept of pressing through the transition and the change in angle, whether you're pushing through the suspension and the wheels on your bike, or you're pushing through your legs to load up the elastic properties of a snowboard or a pair of skis. It's really similar. And I often think that the best coaches or instructors have a bigger bag of tricks when it comes to explanations and analogies and references. And if somebody is coaching a someone on a snowboard who's also happens to be a big mountain biker, then they have that to lean on, right? When you go out, when you're riding A-line and you push your bike into those takeoffs. Yeah, it's the same thing here in the park in the winter. Yeah, we're just standing sideways. Yeah, we're trying to get the same sort of movement patterns happening. Or even when it comes to cornering and pushing into berms. And one of the things we talk about in the snowboard world a lot is kind of using that elasticity of the snowboard or on skis to kind of load and release your center of mass in a new direction. Yeah. And when I'm following you on a berm on a bike, that's the exact same feel that I get. Right? Yeah, it's that loading it's a little different, technically, I guess, because it's the suspension that we're loading, but it's that release that sends me in that new direction. And it's the same sensation that I chase on a snowboard. It's those forces of turning that I chase on a snowboard. And so I think from a coaching and instructing perspective, the more experience and touch points you have with those references, the better you're able to communicate it to a student or an athlete. Yeah, to get them to think about it from different angles.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Paul and I are stoked to be doing this podcast. If you're enjoying the show and want to support us, please take a moment to share our podcast with your friends, your family, colleagues, neighbors, really anybody you know, by letting them know how they can find us and listen for free on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever they get their podcast. The more love we get, the more episodes we can create. All right, back to the show.
Well, and the better you can just understand it yourself internally, and your own movements, right? Like if you're trying to achieve load of force through a turn, you want to feel heavy and you want to feel light, and you're doing that same thing on a board, a ski, or a bike. Like it's the same outcome you're looking for. It might just look or feel a bit different because of the equipment. But,
I think it's interesting that you said about just kind of learning how your body moves. I mean, all of these sports, it's physics, right? It's forces. Yeah. And if you talk skiing, snowboarding, and biking, there's a lot of overlap there. But if you then look at something like golf, where you may not see as much overlap, in terms of like, how do you load up your body? How do you generate tension in your body to create this force to accelerate the club? And I'm not a big golfer, and that might come through in that explanation. But it's all physics, and I think that. So we don't always have to look at sports that relate quite so closely. Even when I'm out on my stand-up paddleboard in the summer out on the lake, and just the little small movements that I make to balance, how I generate force through the paddle. I think it all comes from just that knowledge of, hey, when I make this little move with my body, or even just with an individual joint, when I do this with my ankle or press my toes in this way, this is the outcome that I get. Yeah. And I see that on the stand-up paddleboard, which again, I'm not an expert, but usually I'm, leaving people in the dust because I just get that body movement and how to generate those forces.
And so much of that, and that kind of goes back to the multi-sport idea too, because so much of that is the body awareness. And what is my body doing or not doing? How can I move separate parts of the body? And what are the outcomes I'm looking for from that? And I think one of the coolest things I see with people that do multi-sports, whether it's an athlete or a coach, is literally that. If I give them feedback and say, hey, let's move the knee a little bit more into the frame when we're turning on the bike, they can adjust it quickly, and then someone that takes a while to make that movement, they're just not aware that they can even move the knee, or they think it is into the frame and it's not into the frame, or whatever it is. And that body awareness is such a big piece of it. And for me, that's where I kind of, if I see a rider or a coach that's stuck, for me, that's the kind of thing I always try and clue into. It's like, do you know how you move? And do you know how you should be moving, regardless of the sport kind of thing? But
I think it's really cool to think of it from a coaching perspective. That's what we're sort of doing here is, not just in terms of your own improvement, but in terms of how you teach people. It's really beneficial as a coach to go through and learn something new, or learn, even take something you do and you're reasonable at, but learn how to coach it. Yeah. Become a coach in that other sport, whether you ever plan on coaching or not. But I'm a big believer that taking these coaching courses not only helps you improve, but helps you help others improve. And that's really our goal as coaches, right? Is how do we share this information? And the broader your base of knowledge, the more analogies you're going to become able to come up with, the more you're going to be able to relate to different people with different backgrounds and help them improve. So I think it's a really good challenge to take on that. If you're a recreational stand-up paddleboarder, you're just like floating around on the lake. Well, take a lesson and see what you're missing out on. And all of a sudden, it's pretty neat, right? We should be big believers in it. If we're coaches ourselves, we should be big proponents. And I'm always amazed at how many coaches out there, how many friends I have in the coaching world that'll go try something new. I'm like, well, did you take a lesson? They're like, no. What do you mean? Like, your whole livelihood depends on this, and you're a huge believer in it. You went to learn to rock climb, and you didn't take a lesson? Like, it's such a missed opportunity, and especially as a coach, not just as someone who wants to learn that sport, but as someone who has dedicated their life to coaching, which everybody listening to this podcast has to a certain extent. It's huge, man.
Yeah, we were laughing today because I was telling the group about like last time I took a surf lesson, and the guy was hilarious. So, like, classic, like, if you can just imagine like the crusty old Australian surf instructor kind of stereotype. And I literally luckily I didn't pay for the lesson because my mother-in-law bought it for me for Christmas. She was like, oh, here's a surf lesson, private surf lesson. I was like, oh,
close friend of hers.
Yes. So I was like, that's cool. And I remember the first time he didn't really tell me anything. So let's just get in the water. I'll just push you onto the wave. And I was like, oh, okay. I guess this is just like a warm-up or something. I don't know. Pushes me onto the wave. I stand up. Obviously, I fall over because I'm crap at surfing. And then I just come back to him. And the only thing he said was, that was shit, mate. Do it again. And I literally spent an hour just being told that was shit. Do it again. But eventually, I just started figuring it out. I just was like, I think I'm standing too far back, and then the ball's stalling out. And he did tell me one thing about where to put my foot at one point, I think, on the surfboard. And that, I mean, in 2 hours, I think I got that one constructive bit of feedback. But back to your point, though, I 100% agree. I think it's so much about, I think that's cool. Like, if you can learn to teach a sport, even if you're not very good at it, like, and even if you don't teach it, like, that's the other thing I see is, we get a lot of snowboard students, a lot of mountain bike students, and they're not coaches. I'm like, well, just go do your level 1 because it will upload the hard drive with so much more technical data that, going back to the body awareness piece and understanding things like physics, biomechanics, forces, like you've just increased that technical knowledge. And you'll just become a better rider, even if you never want to coach at all. But
I think it's interesting, as an experienced coach, that is the risk of taking lessons. I've taken a few like those over the years where I'm like, oh, this is a terrible lesson.
Yeah.
But that's all part of the learning process as well. And you can, as someone who's dedicated themselves to coaching, you can sort of look at that and be like, okay, so even though I don't understand this sport, how could this lesson be better?
Yeah.
How would I approach this differently? And how can I be aware of this in my own coaching?
Yeah.
When I'm teaching the sports that I am trained to coach. It's all part of the learning process. You have to be a student of life, student of everything. Yeah.
Totally. Don't tell people they're shit.
It's got a place,
Yeah, it's got a place. That's shit, mate. I think that's kind of cool. And for me, it kind of goes back to, I like to think of it in terms of, if I want to get better at something, and I think of it like a movement pattern, then I think, well, how many different ways can I play with that movement pattern? And so, like, for example, heel edge on a snowboard, the classic one is they sit down way too much, they kind of break at the waist. And if you look at mountain bikers going through a corner, often their knees will collapse, and they'll end up kind of doing the same thing where the knees collapse and they break at the waist, and then they're like hunched over the rear wheels. So sometimes it's like being aware of a movement pattern to do versus like a movement pattern to try and avoid, to not do. And I found a bunch of success in recent years talking like with some snowboarders that bike. I can say like, that thing that you used to do in berms where you get squashed and then you just collapse at the waist. Like, we're going to push our hips forward and we keep our legs stacked, and we're going to do the same thing we do on a bike, where we kind of just tuck everything under the hips. Let's just do it on the heel this time. And it's straight away, like almost instantly, that they've stopped breaking at the waist on the heel edge. And there might be some other issues, like now they're too tall, now they're a bit too stiff, but largely we've kind of fixed it, at least. And are there any other examples? Like I feel like a lot of listeners love that kind of meaty stuff with like, I want to know how to turn better on a bike. Like if you pick cornering for a second, you know, for me, snowboarding is turning, the yearning for turning series. Mm-hmm. And then apparently there's a thing called a park and there's rails and stuff like that. But
you never know to find it.
Yeah. And that's fun, and I love it obviously. But for me, like my passion for snowboarding is turning either on creepers or in the powder in the trees, and really for me, I started mountain biking first, so I try and recreate the feelings I have on a bike on a snowboard. Like I remember once on the level 4, I think it was, with you, Jeff, and we were doing bumps and stuff, and I like on a bike, I'll tend to manual through rollers. And I was doing that a little bit on the snowboard. I think you mentioned it to me where, I haven't seen anyone do that. And I thought, maybe I'm just riding like a complete kook. But I still find myself doing that on my snowboard a little bit these days. It's like those little movements I get on the bike, and I'll try and recreate that on the snowboard. And what are some other examples you guys relate to? Because you're both amazing snowboarders. My first memory of Jeff snowboarding was just destroying some bumps in Big White, and that vision,
they're pretty soft.
It was, I don't know, but that video is still in my head to this day, and I just remember I didn't even know you could ride a snowboard like that. Like it blew my mind at the time. It still blows my mind when I watch you guys snowboard. But what are some examples you guys have from both being bikers and both being snowboarders? What's some kind of personal examples?
Well, I sort of come at it the opposite way because I've been snowboarding. I've snowboarded a lot more, obviously, than I have. Yeah. I've been biking for a long time, but I've spent way more hours on a snowboard. And so I sort of look at it the other way, where I try to recreate the feelings I get from a snowboard on a bike somehow.
Yeah, totally.
And one of the big ones is around that idea of like deflecting through terrain, right? And so one of the things I often try to do on a snowboard is kind of, especially if it's sort of bumpy or undulating terrain, is kind of find a big ugly hole and kind of stick my leg into it and with some force, and be ready for that bump to deflect me like a pinball in a new direction.
Yeah, it's like that rebound.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so my ongoing challenge on a bike is always cornering, and so I'm trying to find the same thing, is that sort of spike of pressure, that apex of pressure at the apex of the turn, where it sort of sends you across to the next one. And when you were describing that move, cornering move of sort of getting hunched over the back wheel and kind of breaking at the waist, you were pretty much describing my common go-to cornering move on a bike. And so it's been
your preferred method.
Yeah, exactly. So it's been this season, actually, riding a lot of bike park days, it's been a real sort of breakthrough year in just kind of keeping my hips underneath me. And I always think about if I had a snowboard strapped to my feet and I was going to make this move, I wouldn't fold in those weird ways.
Yeah, you'd be strong.
I would stand in a stronger position.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's just adapting it to this new piece of equipment that you're standing on. Yeah.
Common one I see with snowboarders, and I'm guilty of this as well, is like, I often talk about mountain biking as you control the front of the bike with the waist up, and you control the back of the bike with the waist down. Mm-hmm. And snowboarders tend to ride a little bit like waist up is dead.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you're just holding on.
Right.
And quite active and driven with the knees and the lower body and the legs and the hips and all that stuff, but then not as active in like steering, leaning, pushing with the upper body. I don't know if that connects.
Well, you spend a lot of time on skis and a snowboard trying to quiet the upper body.
Yeah.
Right. And like the best skiers and snowboarders have very quiet upper body. They can create stability through the upper body, and maneuverability and agility comes more through the lower. So
I think that's similar in mountain biking. Think about it. Your upper body, hopefully, it's not moving around a ton. Your arms are moving quite a bit to manipulate the bike, but
that's the piece.
Your upper body is actually pretty stable.
Like your torso is quiet, and then your arms are really active.
Right.
And that's the missing piece, I think. But for the listeners, like Simon might be a bit embarrassed, but Simon's a bit of an anomaly because he's a 444. He's a triple threat. And there's not. Is there anyone else? I know I've asked you this in the past, but like.
Yeah, so Paul's referring to level 4 CASI cert, level 4 CSIA, so on the ski side here in Canada, Canadian Ski Instructors Alliance, and then level 4 through the mountain bike side of things as well. I don't know that there's anybody that's got that combination. There's other people that have 3 level 4s in different combos. I'm not sure if there's anybody that has that. But, it sort of speaks to maybe my stubbornness more than my overall ability to perform, but also just that passion to learn and try new challenges and figure out different things. And so it's interesting. I hear in the podcast a lot, and obviously you guys have a ton of experience on the snowboard side of things, and I also bring kind of that ski side of things to it, and it almost aligns a little bit better with biking because we're straight ahead at the same time, right? So
I often think that. I kind of think like, why did I pick snowboarding? I mean, obviously we know why, but really I should have picked skiing. It would have been way better for me.
In some ways, it's interesting though. I've worked with a few people here in the summer, just friends, that are skiers and quite high level skiers. And then obviously we live here at Silver Star. They're like, well, I better try this biking thing. And it's generally quite easy to teach them and quite easy to have them progress relatively quickly because so many things can translate. And it's the same for snowboarding too, or similar, but I think it's even more closer relationship with skiing in terms of certainly the lateral balance, that side to side, and how we edge the skis and how we angulate the bike, put the bike on edge essentially.
I think,
and also the fore aft. I always relate, or I tend to very often relate with them, sort of the pressure between the front and the rear wheel. It's like pressuring the edge of your ski evenly. You don't want to be too much over that tip. You definitely don't want to be too much over the tails. You can have a lot of fun back there sometimes, but generally speaking, you want to be bending the ski from the middle, and it's kind of the same for the bike. And physiologically, how that relates is hips over the feet. Is the big one. You've got some bends in your ankles and your knees and your hips, but generally speaking, again, there's no fixed position. We're constantly adapting because of all the forces, but generally hips over feet is a good place to be. And it's the same when you're on a set of skis. And in a snowboard, typically hips between the feet, right? Sometimes you'll pressure the back a little more. Sometimes you'll pressure the front. Same on a bike. But generally speaking, that sort of default place where we want to be working from is between the wheels or between the tip and tail of that piece of snow equipment.
It kind of reminds me of like there's a few trampoline programs in Whistler, and and I've been thinking about that a bunch lately. But like, how do you align the body to deal with forces coming up from under the ground? Like whether you're a trampoline, a bike, a ski, like there's so many common movement patterns there, and it. Unfortunately, my trampoline's broken at the moment due to some poor winter storage, which definitely was not my fault. And I think a lot of it is just going back to understanding forces and biomechanics, and really how there's just so much commonality there. Regardless of the sport,
it's positioning your body to deal with force. I've had an interesting experience over the last 10 years or so with. I've always been a bit of a gym rat and lifted weights and stuff as a way to stay fit, but
me too.
Yeah, we can tell clearly. But I've gone down this avenue of getting into sort of the strength and conditioning world and getting some certifications in that world, and ended up coaching in a CrossFit style gym and then owning a gym for a few years. And it's been interesting to take what I knew and what I've done for so many years in the mountains, instructing people to position their body in certain ways and then apply that in a gym setting, because it's all about maximizing force, whether it's jumping or being quick. Or the difference there that I found is it's much simpler because it's such a controlled environment. So a squat is a squat, and it happens the same way over and over and over, and you're standing on flat ground and you don't have gravity trying to pull you off balance.
Nothing's moving.
Exactly.
completely stationary.
You don't have a tree bearing down on you if you're going too fast and all of those things. So, but it's all the same. It's about this relationship of center of mass to base of support.
Yeah.
And whether you're doing an Olympic weightlifting move or trying to navigate the bumps on a snowboard or railing through a berm on a bike. And I think it speaks to our sort of our initial topic here, which is just the value of exposure to varied environments and varied challenges.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, it's good to talk about the technical side of all of these sports and how there's the link with physics and biomechanics and forces and all this stuff. For me, I think there's a really interesting link mentally.
Yeah.
Like something I see with the level 4 is a good example, or any high-end kind of coaching course. You know, those coaches that have either competed or taught at a high level in another thing, just their mental resilience is way higher.
Mm-hmm.
And people that really struggle on the level 4, not always, but they tend to more often than not be that single sport coach, right? Like, and potentially haven't competed.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I could be wrong on that, but that's just sort of my rough guesstimate. I don't. Would you agree with that?
Well, I sort of take a little different interpretation on them. I totally agree 100% that there's a kind of a mental angle to this too, and for me, it's around preserving enjoyment for the activity.
Yeah.
And so I'm always amazed after what will it be this year, 34 years of snowboarding, that I still get really stoked when I drive to the resort to go snowboarding.
Yeah.
Which is crazy after many thousands of days and probably a million chairlift rides. You'd think you'd get bored of it.
Yeah.
But it's the same in the summer now when I drive to the bike park or when I drive to my local trailhead to go for a bike ride. So the mental aspect comes in terms of maintaining, like, just stoked to do the activity. And kind of like I sort of referenced earlier, where if my only thing was snowboarding, that other 8 months of the year or 7 months of the year would really suck, right? Because you're just waiting for November again.
Yeah. Yeah, the other example I was thinking of too was like your ability to cope with stress and fear.
Yeah, and that too. Yeah, like, exactly. Yeah.
I see generally mountain bikers that snowboard are way more comfortable with hitting a cliff. Riding fast through. Yeah, because they deal with all this stress on the bike, and then snowboarding's like, you know, and I just generally speaking though, they're just more comfortable with pushing it, stretching their comfort zone, right? And vice versa. And I even see it with athletes too, like athletes that tend to crumble or get super stressed out in a race.
Yeah.
It's like, do you compete in anything else? Have you ever competed in anything else? Yes or no? And you can pretty much tell, like, and I think the mental angle is just, it's another kind of selling point for, like, if you're really into biking or snowboarding or whatever sport it is and you want to get better at it, regardless of, like, physical conditioning, technique, body awareness, like, just mentally, if you're always coping a little bit, not always, but, like, throughout a calendar year, you're challenging yourself mentally, and you're dealing with success and failure and fear and confidence, and you're dealing with those things through the year. Then when you finally get to your favorite sport and you want to push yourself, chances are mentally you're going to be way more resilient.
Yeah, getting comfortable being uncomfortable. I mean, to take it back completely full circle, talking about developing mental resilience with, and we started off talking with kids. I mean, I watched my son. He was really into skateboarding, still is. Had a bit of a catastrophic injury last year and doesn't skateboard a lot. But watching him go through the process of becoming a really good skateboarder,
he was really good.
Yeah,
well, he is really good.
But what it taught him was how to fall and figure out if he was hurt or injured and how to get up again. And I watched him try kickflips. Like, it was during COVID, he would go to the garage and try like 100 kickflips a day and probably fall on 99 of them, and he'd get up every time. And now it's translated to his snowboarding and his biking.
Yeah.
And if he crashes on his bike, he's more likely now to say, I'm fine, I'm going to keep going. It's probably turned into maybe the opposite problem where you got to be like, you're not fine, right? That crack in your helmet is not normal, but it really taught him to kind of like push towards a goal. And I mean, talk about hard sports. Skateboarding is really difficult, and it's hard on the body. And talk to any skateboarder, right? And so that's a real interesting sort of piece from the mental kind of development resilience side.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
I mean, I say I can relate. I can't relate because I can't skateboard for shit. But I started to learn to skateboard when I was 40. So one winter when we were in Australia, I bought a longboard. And you'll probably laugh at this, but I was literally that guy with all the bike gear on down at the beach road. So I was so glad anyone I knew wasn't like even in the same country.
You had to go around the world to do it, right?
Totally foreign country. Literally no one knows me. So I've got my bike knee pads on, elbow pads on. But yeah, I took that winter and I learned. I mean, I never skateboarded before, and so I was terrified. Even if you bring a skateboard in now, like I'd have to hold on to the desk, stand on it, and then after a few minutes, I'd be okay. But you know, just going through that process of learning to longboard, and now I'm at a point where I can get my longboard, go out my driveway, and as long as it's dead flat, I'm okay. Any kind of gradient,
real progress,
and you pad it up.
Oh yeah. No, I have got to the point where I don't have to pad up now and completely embarrass my children. So I can do it in public now, I think. But yeah, it's still early days. But it's a good example. Like skateboarding, it's just.
I think it's important to put yourself in those situations.
Yeah.
You know, I see it a lot of times on courses. You know, coaching and certifying, or training and certifying coaches. And, you know, we really encourage people to look at those as like a professional and personal development opportunity, but inevitably people look at it as a bit of a certification. It's a bit of a test.
Yeah.
You know, we do what we can to avoid those emotions on the course, but it comes out and you sort of ask yourself, or sometimes I ask the candidates, well, when was the last time you put yourself in a really stressful situation?
Yeah.
And how did you perform?
Yeah.
And, you know, as an adult, sometimes we don't do that. We get pretty comfortable in our own routines, our own lifestyles, and even in our biking, we ride the same trails over and over again. We ride the same people over and over again. So as a development tool for coaches, I think going on these courses is really important. And go on them and don't think about them as a certification. Think about them as a development opportunity, personal and professional. And you know, if you've taken the flow course or you're level 2 certified, go back and take it again. There's still value in going back. You're going to learn different things the second time through. And the reality of these certifications for coaches is that you might top out, you know, especially if you're a part-time coach, you may never reach that top certification. And there's no harm in that. There's no shame in that. But it doesn't mean the learning stops. You know, go back and repeat the same course again. And it's never the same course. You're going to be with somebody different running the course, probably. You're going to be with different people in the group. Yeah. And that's just going to continue your progression as well. But that opportunity to put yourself in a stressful situation. So whether it's going to a course and putting yourself in that or hitting the local race series, you know, the Friday night race series, and just putting yourself in a situation that's a little bit different, or riding with different people, or challenging yourself to ride a trail you've never ridden before. You know, be safe, make good choices, but it's amazing how often people get into that kind of routine. And all of these things, whether it's, you know, in biking or in snowboarding, seeking out new terrain, chasing different people, chasing different lines, it's all about problem solving and decision making. Mm-hmm. And I think these sports that we do rely a lot on split second decision making. And the more it's really hard to train that other than by doing it. But the way I think we could train it the best is to force ourselves to make a bunch of different decisions, not always make the same decisions. So when you learn to longboard, even though you're going relatively slowly on super flat terrain with your knee pads on and your elbow pads on, you're problem solving. You're making decisions and you're figuring out what happens when you do this. What's the outcome of this?
Yeah, because I didn't get a lesson.
You probably should have, though. That's my number one.
No, classic.
I got this.
How hard could this be?
Right. To me, it's a lot about that decision making and training forcing yourself to put yourself in situations that force you to make different decisions than what you normally make. We almost get to the point in our lives where we're almost not making decisions, it seems, just because it's such a routine, right? And it's kind of the same if you ride the same trail over and over again. How many decisions are you really making on that trail?
Thanks for listening, everybody. Paul and I get a lot out of this project. We hope you do too. If you'd like to help us grow this show, check out our Patreon. By becoming a supporter, you can help us cover the cost of the show, as well as help us make this an exceptional show with great topics and insightful guests. You can find a link on our website, the mountainbikecoachingpodcast.buzzsprout.com. Thanks, and let's get back to the show.
And one of the pieces of feedback that I give to a lot of candidates on courses at the end of the course is look for different lines. I write that all the time. It's like follow somebody else. So yeah, even if you're not ready to step up to that harder trail because it's a little too risky or your skills aren't quite there, ride the trail that you run all the time, but ride it differently. Follow somebody else. And that's a great way to...
That's interesting. Like I would say tactically, one of the things that helped push my riding as I've got older, probably one of the things that's helped the most is following riders better than me and just seeing the lines they take. Like I remember following Chris Kavarik a few years ago, and it was wild. Like I didn't even know you could do that, like change direction that quickly on a bike. I was like, what? And B, like half the stuff was even rideable. Like some of the entry to the
It's not even on the trail half the time.
Yeah, well that's true. Like some of it's like, well, technically you're just in the forest now. Like, but it was incredible, and it just totally opened up my mind to like a completely different way of riding. But I think it can kind of be summarized a little bit with something Jeff said, which is like being comfortable with being uncomfortable. And like the way you mentioned it there, like I'm kind of realizing now as you speak, like what was my motivation behind learning to longboard? And I don't think it was really because I wanted to longboard. Really what it was, just me keeping like, I want to keep being active. I want to keep learning. I want to keep dealing with fear or whatever it is, and it's trying to just keep that body or mind open to movement patterns, coping with fear, coping with anxiety, just kind of being, I always say, like I'm an amateur athlete and I'm a professional coach. But partly what makes me a professional coach is I'm constantly an amateur athlete. I'm constantly trying to figure out a sport and get better at it because I'm not naturally talented and I don't train. And the usual story. But I think that's what makes us such good coaches.
Yeah, knowing what it's like to learn something new again is a huge skill. We talk about this a lot, or when I teach a level 1 instructor course, for example, to new instructors, it's like one of the first things we talk about with teaching beginners is remember what it feels like to be a beginner again. And
a lot of them can't.
That's right. Yeah. And so developing that empathy for the beginner experience is really important. And if you haven't put yourself in a situation to be a beginner anytime lately, then it's hard to have that sense of what your student is going through.
You can't fake empathy.
No, and especially with sort of, so-called higher consequence activities like biking and snowboarding. And it's really important to remember the stress points that your students or your athletes might have. And if you haven't had those in years, then it's really hard. So experiencing what it feels like to be a novice or a beginner in a variety of different activities, I think is really key there.
I'm a little bit jealous of modern snowboard beginners though, because
it's way better.
My stress point was that I would bend my ankle to get on my toe edge, and then nothing happened. So just sheer pain usually for like 3 days.
Yes.
We're aging ourselves here a little bit. But
I think to follow on what Jeff was saying, though, I think one of the really cool things about our sports are that everybody experiences those same emotions just at different levels. So part of, you're an experienced mountain bike or experienced mountain bike coach, go and challenge yourself, try something new, try something that scares you a little bit. Again, be safe, make good choices, but remember that emotion. And that beginner that you're teaching is going to get that same emotion, that same sensation, but on a green trail.
Yeah.
But you can still relate, so you don't necessarily have to. Yeah, I mean, it's still great to go learn something new. But even within our own sport, I think the last time I stood at the top of a really steep rock roll that I knew was in my abilities, but I was like, okay, this is pretty serious, and that that adrenaline that gets going. Well, just remember that your students are going to feel that the first time they get an inch off the ground with their wheels, and that's what's pretty neat about our sports, I think.
Yeah, I love that you said that because that it's funny. Like literally yesterday, we were talking about that. We were saying how. Even just technically, like I will have the same mistakes and bad habits as a beginner, my knees might collapse, I might get my weight back, whatever it is, but it's happening on way harder terrain at way higher speed. So even technically, I'm going to have the same problems that a beginner will have. It's just different speed, different terrain. And what you're saying there is exactly the same mentally. Like, we're going to have the same stoke factor, fear factor, anxiety. It's just what terrain are we riding and what speed are we riding, but we're all experiencing the same things. Cool. Well, I think that's a good place to end it. Wrap it up.
It's always tough to end it, right? You feel like there's a million things you could talk about.
We could totally talk about this more, but I'm
just
really
getting worked up. It's interesting. I was telling Paul before the podcast, I've been catching up on a bunch of these podcasts while I've been walking the dog, and I just get fired up listening to them all, because every single one I feel like I've got something to add, and they're like, yeah, that's awesome. So it's not a shameless plug, and Paul didn't ask me to do this, but if you haven't listened to a bunch of these, or you've listened to them in the past, go back, because I bet you'll find something in each of those that really sort of makes you think about what you're doing as a coach and how you could be better. And I think it's part of that ongoing learning thing. It's pretty cool. It's been, I shouldn't say it's been a surprise to me, because it shouldn't be a surprise, but it's been a good eye opener, a good reminder that, hey, I can listen to some of this stuff that's very familiar material for a lot of it for me, but there's always a little nugget in there. Like, that's pretty cool, man. And,
I appreciate that. Mate, especially coming from you, as someone I've learned so much from over the years. And, honestly, that's partly why Christian and I did this podcast, was kind of what we're talking about is like being comfortable with being comfortable with being uncomfortable. And then it was just sort of a bit of a challenge. How do we challenge our own coaching? How do we challenge our own knowledge? Well, let's talk about it through a microphone. And I still completely don't know really what I'm doing with this podcast thing. Thankfully, I've got Christian, who's way smoother and better at it than me. But
so yeah, we got good guests.
And good guests, to carry me through. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Where would I be?
I think one thing else to add, I feel super fortunate to be sitting at this table with these two folks, these two guys here. And, as a coach, a lot of times in mountain biking, I think we coach a little bit in isolation. And man, the message for me is like, find your crew, because I have been doing this for a long time. I think we all have. And as Jeff mentioned earlier, I still get so excited about it. Part of it is because I've sort of found my group and found the group that motivates me and continues to drive me to be better and continue to improve. So find your crew, and man, it just helps to keep the stoke alive.
Absolutely. Find people that inspire you and make you want to keep going. I love it. We can't sign off though. I just remembered we need a donut.
Donuts.
So do you have any donut stories?
I've got a good one.
Okay, good. Well, I don't want a crap one. So.
It's.
Do you have a crap one, Jeff? You want to share that one?
Well, I want to hear the good one.
Yeah.
Well, my tip is, a bit of an OG mountain bike mecca is North Vancouver. If you ever get a chance to ride there, it's still one of my favorite places to ride. Super creative trail building. And if you get yourself down to Deep Cove,
that's a good one.
Honey's Donuts.
Honey's.
Yeah.
It's I haven't been there in a while, so it's not like I had one this week. But every time I make it anywhere close to the North Shore, I try to get over to Honey's. So,
what's your favorite donut?
So they just do. They probably do a bunch actually, but I just stick to the classic.
You go to the old school.
The honey glaze, man.
Yeah.
But it's not even a round donut. It's just a ball of dough. And you better be doing your bicep curls before they hand it to you, because that thing's got some heft to it. So that'd be my tip. So put North Van on your bucket list for riding, because man, it is still a pretty cool spot to check out. And then you're close to Whistler and Pemby and Maple Ridge and all those other cool meccas that have come up. It's certainly North Van, and then Honey's Donuts down at Deep Cove.
Awesome. Sounds great. Thanks, team.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show and that it sparked some ideas for your writing and your coaching. As always, our approach to coaching is on pros and cons, not rights and wrongs. And with that in mind, our podcast is meant to be more of a conversation about topics and techniques rather than a final say in how to ride or how to teach. As always, please take care if using or applying any of the techniques discussed in this podcast. Stay safe, ride smart, and we'll see you next time.